Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today. I just finished your book yesterday, Painless, your first book, right?
Second.
Your second book. Second. Your first one. We just talked about that. um, and it's a very intricate yet very simple concept of how to manage chronic pain. So, I mean, it kind of fits into the whole realm of things that I talk about on this show about how we can better take care of ourselves and kind of the chronic issues that we deal with, whether it's emotionally, physically, etc. So I'm very grateful that you came on to kind of chat about all these things. Um, but before we kind of dive into that, you've had a career before this world. You had a career in Hollywood.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show. It's such a privilege to be here. Yeah, I actually started out in the theater in London, and then I went from theater to commercials to TV to movies. And so the majority of my career before this was maybe 20 years working in Hollywood, big time movies, and I was doing special effects. Specifically animatronics, which are kind of very sophisticated computerized puppets. So yeah.
So did you start out you said you started out in theater, so did you start out in acting first and then kind of graduate into animatronics and all the digital stuff, or was it kind of always in the tech side?
Um, uh, Probably none of that actually.
None of it.
I've never been an actor. I never had any aspirations of being in front of the camera. One movie, I think I'm in the background of one movie, which is a movie called Michael with John Travolta. I had to swoon over him, which isn't that difficult. He's the most gorgeous man inside and out. Um, so no, I was always backstage. And not digital either. The animatronics are actually physical puppets. This is like before all the digital stuff. You know, if they wanted an animal to talk or, you know, get run over by a truck, do something that animals can't normally or aren't allowed to do, then we would make a copy of exactly that animal, and then it would cut to the real animal and you won't know the difference. So people often say to me, but there's no puppets in that movie. And I'd say, well, does your dog talk? Right? So,
Yeah.
and they know it's computers. I'm like, not in 1994, it wasn't. So yeah, so we actually used to make the with fur, and I was known for fur and feathers. So whether it was animals or wings for John, or you know, whatever it was, I did the special effects that were actually hands-on. Got my hands dirty with glue and paint and feathers and wire and all that stuff, and went around. Thank God, like amazing stuff around the world, working with top people. And making special effects for them. Yeah.
That's fascinating because you ended up your last movie was what, Babe?
Babe was the second movie. We got an Academy Award for that one.
Wow.
The last movie I turned down was actually Stuart Little. Do you remember the movie, the
Yes.
little mouse in the car? I was hired to
Yes.
be the supervisor of all the special effects on that, and I just knew it was time for me to leave. It was for 2 years I've been thinking about making a career change, and it's they used to call it the golden handcuffs. You know, if it's like, well, just one more movie, you know, this one's with Brad Pitt and we're going to India, you know, I'm like, okay, then. It's kind of hard to say no.
Twist my arm.
Right, yeah. But then like the Stuart Little one was like what I'd been working for, and I just couldn't do it anymore. It was like, it's almost like my hands were almost tied, and I just had to call the producer and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this for you. And I knew that as soon as I said that, that would be the end of my career, because there were plenty of people who wanted to, you know, take my place. So um, it wasn't the hardest decision I've ever made, but it was certainly a significant one, making that phone call. Yeah.
And I imagine anybody listening would be like, what? Are you crazy? But we all reach those points in life where we kind of have this life that we think anybody else would love to have, but it's not fulfilling us anymore. There's something else that's drawing you away.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, what was that career change?
At first, I didn't know, which was kind of a bit scary and maybe irresponsible. But um, really, what I pretty much went into straight away was teaching.
Mhm.
And first of all, with children, and being like an art major, that was kind of what I did at the beginning. I used to teach after school classes, like with arts and crafts, and then I got a job as an art teacher in elementary school in Los Angeles, where I taught for 5 years and had an amazing time. Because I would say that our school plays are a little bit different than your average school play, because that I came from the background of doing Les Miserables and and working with Steven Spielberg. So it was really a fun 5 years. And those kids that were like in 4th, 5th, 6th grade now, they're grown up and getting married and stuff now. So it's amazing to see, just being able to be part of their lives. And when I see them now, I bump into them, that it's like they've got fond memories of the things we used to do together. So teaching,
I imagine that it's kind of refreshing a little bit. There's not so much pressure teaching art classes to younger kids as opposed to kind of the Hollywood scene.
Yeah, I mean, I used to walk into the classroom and the kids would go, "Yay!" It's like it's like being a movie star again. It's like, but the older kids, it was actually quite hard, because once you get past like 6th, 7th grade, especially with girls, they get very self-conscious. And they often would not even start the projects because they knew it wasn't going to be perfect. So don't start, because then you can't fail. And so that's when I started kind of seeing the kind of the busy mind. What was going on with them was really interesting, and sometimes very painful for them, because not only was it just stopping them from doing an art project, it was stopping them from doing sport. I mean, it stopped me when I was a kid from doing sports. That self-conscious, occupied with how you look and how you feel, that kind of teenage angst.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually, as a coach now, working with some of those kids who were little when I was their teacher and now are young adults. And I'm working with them as a coach, because they kind of trust me, that I know their background, and helping them with the kind of things that those kids are dealing with now, with social media and Corona, and becoming adults. It's some that feel a lot of pressure.
It's a lot. I've had other guests on, and even kind of spoken about this in my private life to my friends and family, that what we deal with, or me especially as a parent today, nobody, like my mother or my grandmother, cannot tell me how to raise kids in today's world, because we didn't have the kinds of things that my kids are dealing with back then. So it's kind of like this uncharted territory of navigating it blind a little bit. And so, not to mention kind of the stresses that they have in not having somebody guide them through it that has gone through it themselves. So it's kind of this really interesting time. You're right. So you're a coach, and you work specifically in kind of the chronic pain, busy mind kind of realm. Can you tell me, so you obviously became a coach in this area for a reason. Can you take me back to kind of your issues with chronic pain after Hollywood and after this big change? Kind of how you got to be where you are right now.
Sure, because I'm sure it sounds like a bit of a contrast, being a pain coach from being in Hollywood. But I'd actually had some serious injuries when I was in my 20s. I was mugged 3 times, which is, it's bad enough being mugged 1 time, but being mugged 3 times was, it was the early 1980s. So I had severe PTSD, only that was not really, only just being recognized as a thing at the time. So I didn't get any help or any treatment, and consequently got stuck very much in that stressful, thinking, and which kind of stayed with me for a long time. But the chronic pain started showing up towards the end of my Hollywood career, and then definitely in the teaching, where I had terrible back pain. I would get this like twinges in the middle of my back, and then it would pull my pelvis out of place, and I'd get sciatica pain shooting down my leg. I would often, my shoulders and my neck were often really, really tight. I would have a numbness in my arm. And the doctors would always tell me it's because of these injuries that I had. I had a fractured skull from one attack. I had a broken vertebrae in my neck from another attack. I had 3 herniated discs from another one. And also they would tell me that your pelvis is unstable because you have one leg longer than the other. So putting all this together, I just was kind of like in the mindset that this was the way it was, and I'd have to cope with it for the rest of my life. I wasn't in constant pain, But when I was, it was off the charts. It would flare up.
Mm.
And there were several times where I literally passed out and was taken to the emergency room because my whole body in spasm. And there was at least 3 times when I was actually paralyzed from the chest down. I could not move my legs. I remember looking at them and they would not move. Now, thank God it was temporary, but at the time I didn't know that, which is, adds to the frightening terror of it, besides the off the charts kind of pain. And then, I've been coaching people for probably about 30 years, because in between movies, we could often have, 2 or 3 months off in between a project. And I never liked to just sit there and do nothing. So, I was always either volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club or coaching people with all kinds of different, mostly trauma, because I'd gone through a lot of trauma. I kind of trained as a trauma counselor, so I helped a lot of people with that. And trauma can show up in many different forms and different degrees for different people. And so I'd always been in that kind of self-help, transformational kind of thing, and especially living in Southern California, like everybody's doing yoga or reading, doing something that, like gotta feel better, we gotta work on ourselves, And so about 6 or 7 years ago, I came across a new paradigm in psychology, and I was so taken with it that I decided to do some training. And the training was in London. I live in Israel now. I'm in Jerusalem as we speak, and so flying backwards and forwards to London, and also the expense of the course. And when I was there, I wasn't working here, so I needed to save some money. And when about 25 years ago, when my neck had gotten stuck at one point and I was in terrible pain, a chiropractor had said to me that I needed to get chiropractic treatment for the rest of my life, because otherwise my neck would get stuck again. And so I'd been seeing a chiropractor every month for 25 years. And I was kind of feeling okay. And I thought, I need to save some money to do this course. It was a big investment. And I thought, I'll cut out the chiropractor and it was nothing against her. She was amazing. And I thought, I feel pretty okay. So, and if I get, into any difficulty, I can always call her for another appointment. So I canceled my monthly appointment, and the course was 6 months long. And when I finished the 6-month course, I suddenly noticed I didn't have any pain. And I hadn't had any pain all that time. And remember, I've been flying backwards and forwards, staying with friends, that's a lot of stuff to be dealing with, learning and big changes going on. No pain. And then I sat there and I thought, well, when did I last have some pain? And I thought, it's been a few years before that. In fact, it's since I've been understanding these new ideas. And I mentioned it to a friend of mine, and she asked me if I'd heard of Dr. Sarno. Now, your listeners may or may not have heard of him. He was a rehabilitation medicine doctor in New York, and he worked he was kind of one of the pioneers of the mind-body connection with especially with back pain, and then later other physical ailments. Now, remember, my pain had already gone away. So I was curious to read his books, and I happened to read his second book first. And he talks in his second book about how a lot of people had gotten well just from reading his first book. Now, that made perfect sense to me, because this new paradigm in psychology I've been learning was all about how we are always feeling our thinking, that we live in a thought-created world. And so if my world's going to change, it's because my thinking has changed. I have a shift in my perception of something. So if someone's in chronic pain and they're reading a book and they get better, then it's because what they're reading has shifted their thinking. It can't be a treatment because they never met the doctor, right? You could be on the other side of the world reading the book. So this got me really curious. And as I'm reading this and other people, there's lots of other pain scientists now who have incredible research and input. I started getting all these like little light bulb moments where I started seeing that, for example, he explained that the femur bone, which is the strongest bone in the body, the thigh bone, if you were to fracture that, it will heal within 4 to 6 weeks. And I thought, hold on a minute then. So how come I'm getting pain, excuse me, from injuries that I had 25 years ago? They have healed already. Why am I still getting pain? So this really got my interest going. So I started doing a lot of research. And one of the most interesting pieces of research I found was about how, it was from a researcher in Chicago University, and she brain mapped a whole bunch of people, about 100 people. Half of them had acute pain, which is like an immediate injury, a burn, a surgery, something like that, that's in the first month or so of healing. and people with chronic pain, which is technically is classified as after 3 months, because within that period, something under normal circumstances would have healed. So she got them to do brain mapping, which is like MRIs, and she wanted to see where the pain was showing up in their brains. And with the acute pain group, it showed up here in the what's called the prefrontal cortex, the part, the part that's behind the forehead. Which is where acute pain normally shows up. If you were to burn yourself, fracture your ankle, that's where the pain is going to show up in your brain. And the group that had chronic pain, she saw that it showed up not there, but in the back of the brain, in the amygdala or the limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain. So if the emotional part of the brain is causing, producing that chronic pain, clearly something else is going on. And what was really fascinating for me was that the people, just because of statistics, there was going to be some of the acute pain people would develop chronic pain, because statistically that's what happens. And their pain shifted from the front to the back. And her research is actually called shape-shifting pain, if you want to look it up.
Yeah.
So here I was learning that we're always feeling our thinking, and here was science to back that up. So I found that fascinating, and that's kind of where I kind of like launched into my research and my work, by helping other people to understand what had set me free.
So what was the course that you were taking when your pain shifted, when your thinking shifted, when you started seeing results? What was that course?
So this new paradigm in psychology, it's generally called the 3 principles. Some people call it innate health, which is, it's just the same words for the same thing. And it's really, it's been around for about 30 years. It was put together by a Scottish man called Sydney Banks, who ended up in Vancouver. He was a merchant seaman. He was not of any kind of, he wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a philosopher or anything like that, although he kind of became one, a philosopher, that is. And he had some kind of, we could call it an enlightenment experience, where it was the 1970s, and like, everybody back then was, looking for enlightenment and, self-realization and all that kind of stuff. And there were, they were all hippies, and there were also a lot of people going across the border from the States to Canada to, flee the Vietnam draft. So there was a lot of searching and a lot of soul searching, going on. And apparently his wife had dragged him to some kind of, retreat, because they were having difficulties in their marriage, and he was hating it, and he walked outside, and he was talking to another guy who'd been dragged by his wife to this thing, and so Sid was talking about how most of his life he'd felt really insecure, and insecurity was really the thing that was like grinding him down. And the other guy said to him, "You're not insecure, you just think you are." And Sid had this kind of light bulb moment of his own. And apparently over the next 2 weeks, he had a succession of these realizations where he saw through the illusion of thought and came up with this thing of like, we are living in this thought created world. And when we think that is real, that, it produces the experience that, that we're all having. And so just to put it in context, William James, who's like regarded as the grandfather of modern American psychology, he was around the same time as Freud. He actually wrote that he believed all sciences have principles. Physics has principles, aerodynamics has principles, even art has principles. Things close up look big, things far away look smaller. You can have an opinion about it. Principles are facts that are true throughout the world, right? Like if I drop my pencil, it goes down, right? It doesn't randomly go sideways on Tuesdays, right? It's a principle, it's reliable. So William James wrote that he thought that psychology also had principles. He just didn't know what they were yet. So fast forward 70 years, along comes Sid Banks, and he says, I've seen what they are. They are mind, thought, and consciousness. Because if you boil down every therapy, every modality, concept, anything you think of, you will come down to those basic elements. And from there, you can pretty much understand how all experience happens, how all therapies work, because you need thought, you have a mind, and you've got to be conscious to do it. And it sounds so simple, but there's such beauty and freedom in that simplicity.
Right. When I was reading your book, the quote, perception is reality, kept coming up. And then I kept questioning, but is it? You know,
Yeah.
so it just kind of like twisted my mind around a little bit, because we do create these stories in our minds about what is our reality, but you can just as easily shift that reality just by how you're thinking about the world around you.
Yeah.
You wrote a lot about perfectionism, and that resonated with me quite a bit. That part of your book, and I want to read a passage here that I highlighted, because it did touch me, and it did kind of like, oh my gosh, that's me. And have you speak a little bit about this. You said, remember, I was talking about being a perfectionist and how I never saw myself that way, but I did notice everything that was wrong, at least to my eyes and way of thinking. Well, many of my friends have said that my personality has softened since I came across the principles. I mean, I hope I wasn't too much of a monster before, but I know I was very certain about what I believed and thought, and anyone who didn't agree with me was either stupid or needed educating. Well, I'm seeing now that I got more clarity about the illusion of thought. It automatically relaxed my need to be right. It's very stressful having to be the responsible one all the time. As my mind relaxed, so did my body, and well, that's when the pain left. Now that I know my well being comes from inside, I don't need to be so vigilant about everyone behaving the right way for me to be okay anymore. That right there was kind of a pivotal aha moment for me, because I think that describes a lot of us. I know for me in particular, um, I wouldn't say I deal with chronic pain, but when I do feel stressed, I get pain in my shoulders. I get pain in my mid back. I get very, very tense to the point of pain. And I have to remind myself to relax and to let go, and to kind of, it very much comes from things I can't control. So, can you speak a little bit to this perfection idea as it relates to pain that we hold?
Yeah, it's I because when I was first saw this idea that maybe perfectionism was what was very I mean, it's also obviously a generalization, but I've noticed it in my clients that most people with chronic pain do have a perfectionist streak to them. And and at first I was very uncomfortable with that label. I mean, I don't like any kind of labels or diagnoses, because it can be very limiting. Um, but like I wrote in that quote, it's like then I started seeing that my perfectionism wasn't in terms of like an OCD thing where I had to have all the pencils lined up, or things to be a certain color or something, although I do like that too. But I started noticing that way my brain works is I'm always monitoring, supervising, judging everything and everyone, and I have some kind of standards in my head, or an idea of how it should be, and then when it isn't, I get frustrated, or I get agitated. And going back to the PTSD for a moment, one of the major symptoms of PTSD is hypervigilance. And what for me, that was at first being very cautious about my surroundings, because having been attacked out on the street, 6 o'clock in the evening, it wasn't near my home. It wasn't like I was like being irresponsible, not that excuses anything, but to go out my house, even at the beginning, was terrifying, because I knew the world was a dangerous place, and I knew I was going to get hurt, because it happened 3 times. Like if someone, it seems to be like me that's going to get hurt again. So it took some work and help from some really amazing, wise people to help me like get over that fear of my surroundings, and then I was able to go out. And then by the time I was doing the Hollywood stuff, that was just like part of my history, and I'd moved on and was doing great. But what I think happened was that then getting very much into self-help and transformation, all that stuff, it's almost like I took that vigilance from my outside circumstances and turned it inward. And using things like, like writing or meditation, or things that are in themselves innocently, wonderful things, with a perfectionist kind of mind, I kind of use those to monitor my thinking, because I'd gotten to the place where I saw that negative thinking had got me into a lot of trouble, and negative thinking, obviously not good. So therefore positive thinking is better. And so I worked really hard on like keeping the hygiene of my thinking in a good place. So if ever I got hurt feeling or resentment, so it was like, no, not allowed. Don't do that. Don't think that. Journal it. Like meditate it away. Constantly vigilant about keeping myself away from anything negative or depressive or anxious or anything like that. And as much as at the time I thought I was on the right track, and that's kind of what I was sharing with my clients, I think, teaching them how to ignore their negative thinking, rise above it, all that kind of stuff. But now I understand the nature of thought. The thought is fluid, like it's moving the whole time. And I have no idea what I'm saying right now, but thought is some kind of spiritual energy. That's the best words I can use to describe it. It's a spiritual energy that we're blessed with that is moving through our minds. It's like a constant ticker tape of information. They say we have something like 80,000 thoughts a day. And most of those thoughts are just chitty chatty, thinky thoughts that are, got to do laundry and what's for lunch and like, oh, it's too cold, too hot, But sometimes some thoughts are very sticky. And some thoughts like that may be something from your past, or maybe some hurt feeling from yesterday, or a what if about the future. Those can seem like to stick around or get our attention. But when I started learning that all thought is neutral until I have a reaction to it, and you can only think thought in the moment, then even a memory or a what if about the future is being thought right here, right now. So, and if I'm only ever thinking the thought right here, right now, and it's moved on, then there actually is nothing to do to fix the thinking, because it already left. Right? The station, the train has already left the station. So all those busy things I was doing, like the writing and the meditating and stuff, doing it in order to fix my thinking was kind of messing with the system. And I see now that that's where a lot of the chronic pain was coming from, is because when I think about the times, like when I was having the most pain, when I was having those flare-ups, it was like working in Hollywood back in the 80s and the 90s, I was often the only woman on set. It wasn't that long ago, but you think all the other crews, the carpenters, the electricians, the camera guys, the props, they were all men. And so I'd be working on a set with maybe 30 guys, and hair and makeup would do their stuff and then leave. Costume weren't usually around, because once they'd done their stuff, they were off doing something else. And so I'd be the only one on set. So and I was young, I was, in my late 20s, early 30s. I felt this pressure to keep proving myself, like they would treat me like a girl until they realized that I actually have an Academy Award and I know what I'm doing,
Yeah, right.
And I know that now, looking back, that all that pressure was manufactured in my thinking. No one ever said it to me, get out of here, you shouldn't be here. But I imagined that happening. So that was that experience was actually created by my thinking. So putting yourself under that kind of pressure, and then when I became a teacher, and I didn't actually have any formal training, as much it was a kind of a fun job, it was also kind of, like if these kids don't like me, I'm going to lose my job kind of thinking every day. It was putting pressure into my mind, which was then producing like danger signals to my brain, and then when you're in constant fight or flight, you're then sending adrenaline and cortisol and, epinephrine and all that stuff into the body, and which dysregulates different systems. For some people, it's stomach problems, skin problems, migraines, fertility problems. I had several of those things on the list.
Yeah.
And so by understanding that I don't have to be frightened of my thinking. In fact, that's Sid Banks's most famous quote, which is, if only people could learn not to be afraid of their own experience, that would change the world. And it changed my world, my inner world, and then my outer world, because I learned I didn't have to be frightened. If I have a negative thought, it's okay. It's going to move on. It doesn't mean anything about me unless I think it does.
Yeah, that's really fascinating you say that. I had somebody say to me one time, I was commiserating about somebody that didn't like me, or me feeling like I wasn't accepted or whatnot. And I said, well, this is how they feel about me. This is what they think about me. And they said, how do you know that? It's amazing, like the stories that we create in our minds about what we think other people think and how much power we give them. But really, we are the ones that are creating this chaos, this kind of pressure, this resentment, this anger, this fear, this all of the emotions that, again, back to the mind body connection, manifest in our health, the way our bodies feel, the other systems. Because you wrote also, and kind of back to what you just said, um continued anger dysregulates the nervous system, and this causes a depletion of oxygen in the blood that flows to the muscles, and that's what's causing the pain. So we, by not being able to get out of these emotions, or not really be able to kind of control these, our thinking, we're causing like a physical manifestation of our emotions.
Mhm.
So when you're coaching, how do you get people to understand this concept? Because again, it sounds so simple, yet so complicated.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of developed a program. I mean, it's like a 10-hour thing, but it really is to lay a foundation in these ideas, because like right now we're talking mostly about thought, and then there's consciousness as well, and mind, and everybody who comes to these ideas has a yeah, but. Like, I get it's thinking, but, right? And it's normal and natural. And so that's really what happens in the work I do with people, is kind of hammering out those exceptions that people come up with, the yeah buts. Like when I came across these ideas, I'd already gotten to the place where, I knew it was my thinking had got me into a lot of difficulty. And I knew it was like my thinking about the idiot boss, or my thinking about the annoying neighbor or family member. It's not them, it's my thinking. I'd gotten that far on my own. But my question was, what about hormones, right? Like, they're in my body, right? That's not thinking. That's, they're in me, making my temperature go up and down, or making my mood swing. And I had I found many of the amazing things about the Three Principles community is like the generosity of the teachers, people who knew Sid Banks and have been teaching this for like several decades. And I had a Skype, this before Zoom, a Skype with one of the teachers. He's actually a doctor, and so I said to him, what about hormones? Like, get out of that one, And he went, he said, no, it's still your thinking. I'm like, how? He said, well, how would you know your temperature just fluctuated? How would you know you're in a bad mood? How would you know you're hungry? How do you know you're in pain if it doesn't turn into a thought, like you were saying? Because if you think about even something as simple as being hungry, let's say it's lunchtime and you're like, oh, what's for lunch? I need to eat something. And then God forbid your kid, falls and breaks his arm, and you have to rush to the emergency room, and you're taking care of everything. And you might not get home till like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, we didn't eat lunch. You've completely forgotten that you were hungry. Now, your stomach was still empty. In fact, it was getting emptier, but it wasn't in your consciousness anymore. And one of the first things that I kind of struck me about the pain science was a pain scientist called Lorimer Moseley. He's in Australia. Really funny guy, lots of free stuff on YouTube if people want to look him up. And one of the first things I read that he wrote was that we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness. So think about something, again, as simple as like stubbing your toe. If you stub your toe and you're on your own, you're in a bad mood, right? You're going to be cursing, like, who left that there? It's somebody else's fault. Like, we can get all agitated and stuff. But let's say you stub your toe on the way to like opening the door for the pizza delivery or a date or something, you might not even notice, right? It's not in your consciousness. So that's the other thing I'm kind of discussing with people is levels of consciousness. Now, you could call that state of mind, you could call that mood. They're kind of interchangeable for the same thing. In that, if I'm think about it, you can't have low thinking and be in a good mood, the same as you can't have happy thoughts and be in a bad mood. We're always feeling our thinking, and feelings and mood are actually, I used to think they were the enemy, and that's why I was doing all that busy work to get rid of them, change them, fix them. But I see now that they're actually, they're kind of like a barometer. They're letting me know the quality of my thinking, where I'm holding. Because if I'm kind of like, let's say in the basement, as it were, with my thinking, then I'm probably going to be defensive and reactive. My thinking is going to be very rigid and extreme. People are often hostile when they're in a, that agitated place. But if I'm in a more relaxed place where I'm seeing the bigger picture and I'm feeling I'm in a good mood, I'm probably going to be more reliable, more available, more feelings of abundance and gratitude and all that good stuff. So if I experience pain or even bad news or hurt feeling when I'm in a good place, I'm going to handle it so much better than when I'm in a bad place. And there's actually a lot of research to show that someone who's in a state of chronic stress will actually experience pain to a much greater degree than someone who's experiencing the same, let's say, the same injury, who's in a good mood, in a good place. And they've done tons of research on this kind of stuff. Like, for example, if you had a surgery and your hospital room doesn't have a window, it'll take longer for you to recover than a room with a window. Or like if you get the message from a middle-aged man in a white coat, you're more likely to listen to it than if you got it from a girl in jeans and a t-shirt, right? Just there's so much psychology and all this stuff. And when you start seeing that, like you said, all these stories that we start creating, so this person said it, so therefore it's real. Or another way of saying it is, we all live in our separate realities. We're all living in a separate reality created by our own thinking. And like you read in that quote, I used to think that if someone didn't agree with me, either they were stupid or they needed me to educate them. Which is that kind of perfectionist, it's kind of embarrassing to admit that now, but I was pretty good. I would keep it to myself most of the time. I would just scowl at you or something if I thought you were an idiot, But now it's like, now I see that everybody is in their own thought created reality, that there is no right and wrong. Now that's not excusing bad behavior, someone, being cruel or stealing or cheating or that kind of stuff. But even when someone is behaving badly, I can now see that they are operating out of some very low thinking. That is the best they can do with that really crappy thinking in that moment. And everybody would do better if we had better thinking. And so that's why, some people are always in a bad mood, because that's the quality of the thinking that's going on.
You know what I found fascinating too is this idea of people having the same kind of injury, but some would have pain and some would not. You spoke a little bit about like bone on bone and injuries in your book, and about how 40% of people with bone on bone injuries won't feel the pain at all, yet a certain number will. And so the idea that somebody could have this devastating injury and kind of be debilitated for life, and then somebody else would have the same injury and maybe not, and linking their thought processes to how they experience that pain really got my mind all kinds of twisted. Because I think somebody who is dealing with that kind of pain might be kind of pissed off to hear that a little bit, to think that that it's in their control, but how do I control that? Like, what steps? How do you get somebody to take the steps to really evaluate their thought processes to manage their pain when they're so angry about the injury to begin with? Because one of the examples you used in your book was an athlete who kind of had this career-ending injury, which was fascinating to me because the world that we kind of live in, my husband works in college athletics, and we see this all the time, and it's heartbreaking. How can somebody in a position like that accept these principles to heal?
Yeah, it is hard when someone is in that much anger or that much could be depression or anxiety but I can tell you I've seen people I've seen people get this in 5 minutes, and I've seen other people I could talk to them for 6 months and they're still not getting it. In fact, the lady, a couple of people I've seen get it very quickly. I was at a conference in London, and I saw this lady. She told me that she'd forgotten her pillow for her back pain, and the conference was 3 days. And she said to me, she was like, how am I going to sit in these chairs for 3 days? And I kind of took the chance, and I kind of said to her, I used to have that kind of pain, and this lady told me she was about to have a surgery, a TENS machine put into her spine. It kind of interrupts the pain signal to the brain. And she had a walking stick as well. And I told her, I used to have that kind of pain, and it's all gone now. Now, admittedly, she was at a 3 Principles conference, so she did have some, an understanding of these ideas, but she'd never made that connection with the physical, experience of pain. So and I only literally talked to her for about 5 minutes because it was very busy. There's 1,000 people there. We're like going in all different directions and lots of seminars and breakout sessions. And I only got a quick chance to speak to her, and but I could see her brain kind of going, oh, like I did with all the these little light bulb moments where you kind of start adding it together that it doesn't make sense. For example, I still have one leg longer than the other, and I don't have pain. So like when the doctors told me that, it just, a lot of things we get told don't make sense. And I don't think it's because the doctors are obviously not out, being malicious. It's just sometimes they just don't know, and they don't know what else to say, and they're doing their best to help us. So the next day at the conference, now I won't say she was running, but she was coming to find me, and her walking stick was kind of flopping in the air from her wristband. And she's like, Hannah, my pain's going away. And then so on the 3rd day of the conference, I went to find her because I wanted to hear what had happened. And she said she was like almost 90% pain-free. And I got her email and stayed in touch with her, and it continued. Now, like I said, other people, can hear all this stuff. Now, the difference, what I've noticed is some people can hear what I'm saying and they'll get it intellectually. They may even be Googling 3 Principles now as we're talking, and they go, oh, I get it. Mind, thought, and consciousness. You're always feeling, you're thinking. Got it. And just hear it as another technique, and just put it in the pile of, all the other things that they're doing. But this really is, well, first of all, it's not a technique. And I just want to say that it's not just for people with chronic pain. My colleagues work with people in addictions, family therapy, prisoners, at the Mayo Clinic, the UN, corporate mediation, business transactions, because once you understand how the mind works, like, the phrase, all boats rise with the tide, if once you understand how something works, it's going to apply everywhere. So it just happens that my topic was pain because that's what I noticed the big improvement with. So when someone gets it intellectually and just kind of, especially with chronic pain people, we're pretty smart, the perfectionist thing, like we've researched everything, and we're, got those, 3 different degrees, and I can quote anybody, and, because I've got to even do my pain right, I've got to do my recovery right perfectly, that they will skim past like you said, the simplicity of it. But really what this, when people really benefit from this is because they're getting it through insight. And I had an insight with even this last summer, in that most things that we, like transformational programs, self-development programs, they require a certain amount of willpower. Whether it's a diet, an exercise, something like even studying. But if something is relying on my willpower, it's kind of going to be limited to some degree because I'm limited. There is, I'm a pretty smart cookie, but there's a limit to my intelligence. There's a limit to my get up and go, my strength, my willpower. And there'll come a day when either, I'll go to the gym tomorrow, or one more bite, I'll start after the holidays, or like I'll study later, like it's just part of being human. So any kind of transformational thing that's relying on me getting it together is kind of, I wouldn't say doomed, but it's kind of limited by me. doesn't matter what trainer I have or what great program or teachers I have, I'm limited. But if it's coming from inside, a sight from within, and that is, there's no limit to that because you're relying on the infinite, whatever you understand that to be, then there is no limit. There's no end to those resources. And so, like I'm sure you've heard, there's often a big burnout rate with people who are social workers, nurses, PTs, therapists, psychologists. The average time is what, like 3 to 5 years often with people who've got, a heavy load in a clinic or something like that. But my teachers, who are by profession a lot of psychologists and therapists, medical doctors, they've been doing this for 30 years. Because when you step away from the pressure that thinking is producing, and you're able to observe the thought, and that it's going to pass by, it keeps flowing. So like Sid Banks said, we are only one thought away from good mental health. And we're only one new thought away from a new experience. So when I know that, and I know it's a reliable system, and the way I work with people is through analogies and stories and giving them examples, then they start having their own insights, and they go, oh, that's what you mean. Oh, I just got it. My husband said this, and I didn't react anymore because I was in a better. I'll give you one quick example. I have a friend in New York, and she told me that she was supposed to go hiking with a friend on the Sunday. And on the Saturday night, her friend called to say she maybe twisted her ankle and she couldn't go. So my friend asked me, like, what am I supposed to do with that? What does the 3 principles think about disappointment? I said, well, first of all, they're principles. I don't think anything about this. But I get what you're asking me. I said, I kind of talked her through it. And then she had her own insight. And she said, I just realized I'm not actually as disappointed as I think I should be. I thought, ooh, that's a good one. Because we have all these rules and regulations in our heads, like whether it's that perfectionist thing of like, these shoes go with that outfit, or, like the signage, has to be a certain way, or this color or is off, or if you hurt my feelings, I have to be upset, or, this amount of trauma means I'm going to need this amount of treatment, or, if this happens, that, we have all kinds of rules, and as your thinking starts to settle down and you start seeing how most of what we experience as agitation and frustration and anxiety is really just speeded up thinking. That when it slows down, there starts to be spaces in between the thoughts, and that's peace of mind. And in that place, wisdom, intuition, inspiration can come through, and then we get back in touch with our natural innate common sense and our innate well-being. And then we'll think like, oh, maybe I should, because there's nothing wrong with exercising. I walk every day. I was doing water aerobics before Corona, because it's good to move a body, rather than I was doing it, before I was doing it to core strength and like relaxing those shoulder muscles or building up that those other muscles. But now it's like, if I exercise, it's because it's a nice idea. If you want to meditate, meditate. But I'm not doing it to fix myself, because I learned I'm not broken. I'm not broken. I don't need fixing.
I think that's a really great point that people need to hear and accept. And I think, like you said, once you get to that space, then it creates more space for all of this other stuff, kind of the healing, the creativity, the acceptance, the calm. Because I do think we live in a world where it's just this, you're spinning your wheels. Your mind is constantly moving because you feel like that's what it's supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be filling this time. I'm supposed to be filling this space with this or that, or and quieting, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear if you have some quote unquote success stories. I would love to hear some real world transformations of people that have really struck you as being profound.
Yeah. The first one that comes to my mind is a lady I worked with had terrible foot pain. It was so bad she hadn't left her house in probably 8 months, nothing to do with corona, but she just she was in her mid-40s, but she needed a walker like a 90-year-old lady would need to get from her bed to her sofa. And so that would be in her life for about 8 months. And I remember because I have a questionnaire when I have a new client, and I just want to make sure that they have been checked by a doctor, because I am not a doctor, to make sure that everything has been, responsibly taken care of that needs to be. And the doctors have basically told her she'd overused her feet, which when I read that, I was like, what?
Is that even possible?
I'm like, we probably have the best shoes in the history of the world, of the planet. And how can you overuse your feet? I mean, marathon runners run barefoot, it's like whatever. Anyway, so the last time she had come home was from the doctor, who had told her, you've overused your feet, and now she was terrified to walk anywhere. And her world had gotten really small. So she found me on a Facebook group, and we started working together. And after the first session, when she kind of told me her story and told me what happened, and she's sitting on the sofa, she's talking to me. And then she told me about, like, she's just terrified of the idea of getting in a car now. It's kind of built up into like a whole, anxiety thing. So after we got off, and I always WhatsApp with my clients in between sessions just to keep the momentum going and give them support. And I had this thought, and I thought, you know what? Because the whole session I was looking at her sitting on her sofa. And I thought, a car is really kind of like a sofa on wheels, if you think about it, really. It's like 2 armchairs and a sofa stuck to some wheels, really. That's what a car is. So, and so I messaged her, and I said, I kind of put this little idea out with her with some smiley faces. I said, what if your husband brought the car right up to the front door, and you just got in and drove around the neighborhood? You don't have to get out. You're not doing anything. If you can sit on the sofa, you can sit in the car. Try it. Would you be willing to try it? Next day, she sent me a picture on WhatsApp of her sitting in the family car at a local park. She didn't get out, but they took her lunch, and she sat eating her lunch in the car, seeing some fresh air and trees for the first time in months. And then this continued to get better and better, and her pain started to subside, and she started, it started going away. And then I remember after, I think it was either our last session in that kind of program, and she told me this amazing story. She said her husband was redoing their bathroom, and he'd ordered some stuff for the I was going to say alterations. That's not the right word. Renovations. There you go. The renovations. And how when they say, oh, we'll deliver between this time and that time, and of course they come at the other time, right? So her husband was out. She was the only person home, and she told me in her walker, it takes her like 10 minutes to get from the sofa to the front door. But the delivery guy's ringing the doorbell, and she knows that if she doesn't get there, he's going to leave with this delivery, and her husband needs it for, the faucet or whatever it was he was fixing. And she said to me, Hannah, you don't believe it. I got to the door. I was signing for this thing. She said, not only did I not feel the pain, she said, I forgot I had feet. Right?
She'd been so focused on her feet and the pain that it was nice to kind of forget she had them.
She said, I forgot I had feet. Like, you don't understand. I mean, that sounds like a weird thing to say, but it was such a celebration for her that remember I was saying just now about we only experience pain when it comes into consciousness. Yeah. It had gone out of her consciousness because she was concerned about, the guy leaving and not, and helping her husband. She'd gotten out of her thinking and into her life. Right. Mm. And then she's, stayed in touch, and she was telling me that they were planning a family holiday now, and she's like going to go see her mother, and, and her world had opened up, and I've got other stories with people with like health anxiety and, and other things where their world has gotten so small because of what the thinking and the pain can do. I've got another client who went through a terrible, violent marriage. She got out with 2 small children, and then got into another, abusive relationship. But I started explaining these ideas to her. She got full scholarship to go to law school, and she's now in her 2nd or 3rd year at law school, and she wants to, become a lawyer for women to help them so they don't have to go through the same situation that she went through in her divorce. And she's working, she's even helping the school like raise money because they're so impressed with her story, and so when you, it's, for me, it's such a privilege. It's like having a front row seat in someone else's miracle story,
Yeah.
to be able to be there, and all I'm doing is pointing them back to their own well-being. Like, underneath all that stinky thinking and those old ideas and those concepts that have maybe innocently led people in the wrong direction, underneath all that, everybody has good mental health and good well-being. It's our
Right, because we're not born with terrible mental health.
No, nobody is. It's like I always say, like, God doesn't make garbage, right?
Right.
And it's only the stuff that's gotten stuck on top. So when you start having insights and you start seeing the illusion of a lot of these stories we've made up, it starts popping and falling off, and it's not like you have to go somewhere to find happiness or go somewhere to find your well-being. You are well-being, you are happiness.
Yeah.
It's your innate birthright. And so it's just so amazing that I don't ever have to give people advice. I don't have to tell them what to do, because once they get free of the limitations of that old thinking, they know what the answers are. They know what they need to do, because their wisdom innately, naturally comes forward once the old ideas fall away. So that's
right.
really,
Because you wrote one sentence that stuck out to me, is that you can't heal an illusion. So this illusion that you've created in your mind about your life and about your pain and about anything that's going wrong cannot be healed, because it's an illusion. And it's just a matter of recognizing that and getting out of it. And that's another reason why you said something earlier about not liking labels. In the coaching practice that I have, I very much work with women with adrenal issues. So chronic stress, that kind of stuff, where you don't like to slap a label on it because you can get stuck in that label. Or somebody with a chronic health issue. Okay, well, giving a name to it doesn't solve the problem. You just created this kind of tight little bubble around it that you're not going to be able to expand out of. So the whole idea of labels, was kind of profound to me too, because you're limiting yourself then if you're just limiting yourself to that title of I'm broken or I'm in pain or all of those.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Yeah. And I just want to say, because some people might be thinking, yeah, but my pain is real. And I would say that I say to all my clients, the pain is real. It's excruciating. Chronic pain is real. You're not imagining it. But if someone is actually experiencing pain for something like, say, a cancer or something like congestive heart failure, where possibly it's not going to get better, there's still relief on offer here, because your experience of that pain is going to be so much better when you're in a better place with it.
Right.
And I've seen that with people with like end of life situations, where they can be in that place with grace and dignity, understanding what's happening, and have a completely different experience of it than someone who's terrified and frightened and looking at it like from a very dark place.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's always hope, always.
I love that. Well, I mean, this has been a very fascinating, beautiful conversation, and I'm so grateful to you. If anybody wants to find you, find your services, find your books, because you've got 2 out with a couple more in the works, I hear, which would be, which I can't wait.
More coming.
You're a busy lady.
Yeah.
How can people find you?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a website. It's my name, which is chanastudley.com, spelled CHANASTUDLEY.com. You can contact me through there. I have a Facebook group called TMS Chronic Pain and the 3 Principles. You can also find me on Facebook. Like I say, I do one-on-one coaching. I have a mentoring program where I mentor people through WhatsApp, and give people like daily support, and be people's cheerleader through difficult situations. And the 2 books are both on Amazon. They're on Kindle and paperback. The first one is called The Myth of Low Self-Esteem, and that's really more about trauma. Like it's they're not autobiographies, but a lot of it is based on my experiences. So that's and Painless, the new one, is on Amazon. The next one I'm writing is about hormones. I'm going to write one about a mother and two daughters. So between the three of them, we should be able to cover all the hormonal experiences that women go through. I've also got another one in the works about ADHD in school children, and another one I want to do about addictions and abuse. So, and what I found is that by writing them into stories, making it fiction, I think for a lot of people that's much more accessible, because I mean, I think I'm a bit weird that I love reading textbooks and research papers, but that's not everybody's cup of tea. So by having them in stories with the characters who do the searching and the falling down and the getting up and the discovering and the healing, you know, and the discovering, I've had a lot of people tell me that that's a much easier way for them to get this kind of information.
I will say, you know, I've read a lot of quote unquote self-help books or wellness books, and it was really interesting reading it as a novel. It was very, very different and unique because you still got what you needed to get from it, but we had really interesting characters, and we had kind of this build up through the discovery. And so I really liked it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
I look forward to getting to read your future books, and you're going to be busy way into the future, it seems.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, Hannah, thank you again. I really, really, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. It's been really good talking to you. Thank you.